शुरू हो गई.
Started. Hello, Jay. How are you?
Hey, what's up? What's up?
All good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you fine. First of all, I'm gonna apologize to our audience because we haven't made a video in over two weeks. There are two reasons behind it. I've been moving out, and because of that, I've been extremely busy. And also, Raj was also extremely busy. But I think we've given this justification a lot of times in the past, so we're not gonna go into the details.
Yeah, I think the point is to come back to it. It's
Yeah,
okay to get busy, but as long as we sustain what we are trying to do, we will
facts.
keep doing it. So, Jay and I thought that because of the recent developments in the country, a focus of an important internal security issue had gone away, and that was left-wing extremism. Although it has been a front which has been very active, in some ways more active than our issues that we were having along the western border. We know that left-wing extremism has a major historical context in India. It has been a huge internal security challenge for us. So Jay and I thought that we will sort of unpack the historical context of the issues associated with left-wing extremism and track how this government is doing an excellent job of eliminating its cadres on the ground and trying its best to re-establish state support in the really remote areas where left-wing extremism has thrived in the past. So, Jay, let's get your opening thoughts, then we'll go into the details of these issues.
Yeah, so you cannot view left-wing extremism without understanding this small village of Naxalbadi in West Bengal. This village was full of tribal Santals, and one day they decided to rise up against oppressive landlords. And with the blessings of other staunch communist leaders like Charu Majumdar, the movement in itself became a little revolt, but which was very brutally and very violently uh, cracked down upon. In fact, it is said that Indira Gandhi used the expertise of General Sam Manekshaw. I don't know what he was around that time, but Mr. Manekshaw, I think he was a general around that time.
Yeah, no, he
Uh,
was he was GOC in C of the Eastern Army Command,
yes,
which is a
yes,
very
yes,
very
yes.
prestigious. It's a very
Yeah,
prestigious army command. Many Eastern Army commanders have then onward become army chiefs, including recently General Naravane and many other generals in the past. So that
yeah.
just
So,
coming back
it,
to yeah.
yeah, basically his expertise was used to, totally quell down the rebellion. And it is said that when the 1971 war was on its peak, that's when the operations against the Naxalites was like, calmed down. And once their main bases in West Bengal were eviscerated, a new movement started to identify itself with the Naxalbadi rebellion. And even though it was not connected to it, but it did identify itself with it because of India's independence. Because it is said that the communist insurgency that was happening in the erstwhile Nizam territories in in and around 1948, 1949, and after sorry, in and around 19 late 1940s, and obviously after the Nizam territory were made a part of the Indian Union. Then gradually the people who were fighting that rebellion started associating themselves a lot more with the Naxalbadi movement, and they realized that in order to sustain a prolonged people's war, uh, you have to be in areas which are not as accessible as certain areas of West Bengal and are hidden away in such corners of the country which in essentiality are neglected by the Indian Union. In fact, I would say that this was a precursor for so many insurgencies in the Northeast as well. So
Yeah,
yeah, that
so
is the
basically,
brief
yeah.
history of the rebellion. Anyway,
Yeah, so basically, what happens around 1967 is what you explained, Jay, the Naxalbari incident. Then around the 1970s, this starts to sort of get some traction in like Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Odisha, etc., etc. Now, as Jay said, the Red Corridor sort of grows its base around like the Chota Nagpur Plateau, very rural, very remote jungle areas, almost sort of always resource rich. So, this kind of led to the creation of a corridor, which was very popularly, anybody who's been following these issues knows what the Red Corridor is. And at one point, it had a lot of like districts of India which were quote unquote LWE affected. LWE is just a policing or a administrative jargon for left-wing extremism, rather Naxalism, which we use colloquially. So then, the 1990s and 80s, they saw this movement spread to Andhra, Bihar, etc. Like I said, this movement grew. There was a lot of support, and there were some major instances also that happened. Like in 2010, there was the Dantewada ambush in Chhattisgarh, where about 76 CRPF jawans were killed. There was a very popular Congress leader from the state of Chhattisgarh who was assassinated in 2013, with many more supporters and security details being eliminated with him. About 27 people died in that. So you can see that the number of people who used to lose lives in these attacks was also very heavy. And there is a natural support that the terrain would provide to the insurgents. The insurgency moved to dense forest because dense forests in the Chota Nagpur plateau provide a natural cover to insurgents, to left-wing extremism. There is naturally a jungle area, so the administrative control is weaker. Now, these are areas where actually, some national highway infrastructure has been developed. But imagine in the 1970s, 1980s, you can imagine the road infrastructure in, say, rural parts of what then used to be Madhya Pradesh, now is Chhattisgarh. And, so communication access was very poor. So, and this was true even for states like Andhra, Bihar, etc. So, there were many tribal grievances also, which were maybe not always addressed by the state. So, even the local areas, the population of those areas maybe found it more attractive to support this idea of an armed revolution against the state. So, that is sort of an overview. Many people will find this a very basic overview, but we will get down to unpacking the complexities of the recent events as we go further. Jay, let's get your take then.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why it became extremely difficult for the Indian forces to actually deal with such an internal security threat is because the access was so limited that even even the most experienced Indian administrators found it difficult to actually govern these areas, and because most of the locals and the villagers and different tribal groups had an idea as to how to maneuver through these very difficult terrains, it made even more sense for the Indian state to actually incorporate a lot of these locals, a lot of these tribal groups inside the greater security effort. So, in order to go in that direction, there was the creation of this militia outfit called the Salva Judum, and the basic goal of Salva Judum was to fight against the so-called People's War, and its leader Mahendra Karma, who was also there in the 2013 massacre that Raj mentioned, was one of the most stalwart leaders of this movement. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. I'm not going into the jargons, but there was a petition which was filed in the Supreme Court of India, and through a declaration or an order of the Supreme Court, the organization was declared unconstitutional. And this is what brings me back to the other point that I wanted to mention. When I said that the failure of the Naxalbadi movement happened, so a lot of people from the CPIML, which is the Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist, and CPM, which is the Communist Party Maoist. These people basically joined forces and eventually became the CPIM, which we see today, which is the Communist Party of India Maoist. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that true, Raj?
I will also have to recheck this, and
Yeah.
we will also welcome comments from our audience if they can correct us or
Yes.
check
So
this in our
basically,
side.
it was basically CPIM, which eventually said that the way of countering the Indian state is not just through arms and weapons; it is also through garnering soft power, and that could have only been done by uh, getting the youth to mobilize in the major universities of the Indian state. And with respect to that, they they started funding, or they started influencing a lot of these groups in major cities like Delhi, and they basically became their media front or their voice in places of influence. So through them, they started putting a lot of pressure on the central establishment to say that whenever they were cornered, to declare a ceasefire or get a petition filed in the Supreme Court, or try to get a very pro rebel perspective for them. And
Yeah.
this is to counter this. A lot of people started saying that, oh, this is just some right wing propaganda, even though the CPI Maoists have actually released this particular document called the Urban Perspective, which
Yeah. Yeah.
essentially which essentially talks about this, which
Yeah.
essentially talks about garnering this soft power. And yeah, to
Jay, I'll
use
just cut
that.
you off.
Yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, go on. Finish it
to
up and
use
I'll.
that to use that a lot of people in the right wing circles of India started calling these people urban naxals, because they started tooting the same lines of these so-called militant leaders who were hidden away in the forests.
Yeah. So actually, just to add to that, I mean, Jen, I try to be as radically center as we can be. People might say we have our own biases, but who doesn't? But one thing is clear that I am not very imaginative and I don't place myself on a political spectrum. But one thing that has been proven beyond reasonable doubt by our law enforcement agencies also, under credible political leadership, regardless of any political party, there has been support to left-wing extremists from academicians based out of Delhi. There has been social circles within those areas from maybe some policy think tanks or maybe some universities who have provided great sympathy to the left-wing extremist movement, and that's something that really cannot be denied. Now, many people might have different views at the Bhima Koregaon accused, but we all know that many of them were writers, professors, and there is definitely a linkage there. Now, this linkage is also very elaborate because financial resources has to be generated for extremists to sort of join in their ranks. Now, how does uh, a financial system be developed for a extremist organization like the Naxalites? So what they started doing was that they became a very elaborate extortionist ring. So maybe from good input received from intellectuals in Delhi, they learned extortionism. They learned to become like a little bit of a mafia. They became fairly good at logistics. So there are OGWs, like we keep hearing the term OGWs for Kashmiris, but there are overground workers even for like these left-wing extremist organizations. So they do good logistics. They had their own sleeper cells and with decent support at some academic institutions in Delhi. Now, I am not raising a case against freedom of speech. I am not again raising a case to, arrest and detain writers and professors who don't agree with you. I'm just saying that there have been some instances where support has been generated for Naxalites in urban areas, and that can be sorted out by better policing and stronger monitoring of what happens in certain institutions without hampering their freedom. Sounds contradictory, but I think it's worth a shot. Jeff, back to you.
Yeah, so to corroborate what I was saying was that the CPI Maoist was actually was a merger between CPIML, People's War, and MCCI, which is the Maoist Communist Center of India. So yeah, technically we were right, Raj. So it was the merger of these two groups back in
How
2004.
surprising. How
Yeah,
surprising. We ended up being right.
yeah.
Go
So
on. Sorry. Yes.
yeah, so that this is what basically started the modern phase of the conflict, and whatever Raj added after that. And yes, so that I mean, it is very fascinating as to how in such thick jungles they could, like, smuggle in so many explosives, so many sophisticated weapons, even though their tactic was like hit and run and capture from the downed soldiers. And this is quite fascinating that even after being surrounded by so much of firepower, CAPFs, other types of forces, state police, you were able to sustain a prolonged insurgency, a very violent insurgency for such a long time. So this can only happen in two ways. And the two ways are: one, very, very big local support. Number two is I would like to call it the support from outside, the OGWs, as you mentioned, like, people sitting in Delhi and like all these urban centers, like, giving them the right piece of information that they want, trying to, manipulate intelligence, and like, trying to mislead the security forces. So this is what has, somehow dragged the insurgency on for far longer than it should have dragged on, in my opinion.
Yeah,
And right now, I think we can confidently say that we are reaching its nemesis. We are reaching its fag end. And the reason why it has happened is because of, again, local support to the Indian state through DRG. Raj, do you want to
yeah. I will
emphasize on
go
the
in.
DRG?
I will go into that. Before that, I want to pause and reflect on what you were speaking about earlier. We'll dig deeper into like some of the causes, as people used to say. It's the oldest story in the Indian Union that there was a land alienation of the tribals, particularly in what we call the scheduled areas. There were exploitation by money lenders, contractors. There were displacement due to mining and industrial projects. Like we said, these are resource rich states, and maybe there were requirements of land reforms that didn't happen as well. There was an absence of, forgive me, excuse me, there was,
Hello, Raj.
yeah, sorry, there was a absence of basic services like health, education, infrastructure. So these are old stories, but and I'm not saying that these issues were not there. These issues were very much there. That's why Naxalism got its support in the first place. But the Indian Union, its constitutional values have always given ceded space to peaceful political process and absorption of political ideologies through peaceful means. And that is the first basis on which you can delegitimize the left-wing extremist armed groups, because if you have a political ideology, you are allowed to become a part of the political process. And that in itself sort of should have initially been reason enough for people to not pick up arms. But where, to the Indian state's discredit, maybe we didn't reach out to our forest areas, maybe we didn't work on our in like information delivery in the early 70s 80s. That was a difficult job to do also. So maybe a lot of people did get drawn to the Naxalist ideology. However, I think as time passed by, these ideologies became definitely less popular in the more urban areas, despite the overground workers and the support that the Naxalites have had. There has been major successes that the state apparatus and the security forces have been leading, and that actually brings me to the role of the locals in combating these issues. Jay mentioned the District Reserve Guard of the Chhattisgarh, the DRG. We cannot talk about the DRG of Chhattisgarh without first talking about Selvajudam. There was huge gains that were made by Selvajudam because they were compromised of locals. Locals in any insurgency can do such an amazing job of detection, monitoring, intelligence gathering, and even dialogue. So these locals who were able to help the Indian state were also able to counter Naxalite forces greatly. Now, whatever the Supreme Court did, in my view, it was an imprudent decision. However, India's judiciary also has its limitations, and they are also not known for the best decisions lately. Uh, leave that aside. What happened later was that there were some shortfalls that came in operating for the CRPF, because you need local support. You need to rebuild that local support, and I think. Finally, lately, what has been happening is that locals from Chhattisgarh have been recruited into the District Reserve Guard, and the DRG has become like the tip of the spear in the operations against Naxalites in that area. They are locals, they are heavily trained, they are very motivated, and like I said, there are advantages that the local policing organizations have that central armed police forces might not have in some areas. They have some They have, they have local political knowledge also. They have local supports, so there's just so much advantage to countering insurgency through the usage of local police forces. There is a lot of rehabilitation activities that they can do. They can do counseling efforts. They can do, like I said, trust building and community policing. So there's these are very general words. Community policing is something you hear 1,000 times, but what that actually means is that you have people from your own villages doing gram sabhas, sports events, health camps, and that sort of becomes the first instrument of generating some confidence in your state apparatus. And then obviously when you have the DRG doing such an excellent job, you can get a joint operating capability with the CAPFs. You have CRPF and its own Cobra battalions, which have been raised to counter left-wing extremism. So there's like this huge, almost well-oiled machinery that's at war right now against these left-wing extremists. And the learnings we've done is exactly why we are able to eliminate Naxalites at such great scale. By we, I mean like the state of India. So that's like my overview. And
I think,
naturally,
yeah, you're totally right.
sorry for
Yeah.
getting into this yapping loop. I'll just wrap up soon. And this is not to say that other state police forces haven't done an excellent job. Anybody who's followed internal security in India has no heard of the Greyhounds in Andhra Pradesh. IPS probationers train with them. There is a lot of learning that they give to many people who follow internal security, and they have
Cobra Group,
yeah, they have played an excellent role. The
Cobra.
Cobra battalions of the CRPF I already mentioned.
Mm,
They
mm.
operate across states. I am presently in Madhya Pradesh, which has now two remaining LWE affected districts, Balaghat and Mandla, which is where the Madhya Pradesh Police's Hawk Force operates. They are also the more elite persons over here. So every state which has been affected has done their learning. They have made notes on jungle warfare. They have made improvements in equipment, and they have, after all, had fighting experience. They're battle hardened guys, and that's why I think the gains that are being made by the MHA is happening in great coordination with the local police, where the tip of the spear, like in Chhattisgarh, is the DRG. And without them, it's obviously impossible to do. And I think lastly, there's only a certain there's a diminishing returns to operating only like through combative means. I'm absolutely a huge fan of the way the Chhattisgarh police and CRPF are eliminating Naxalites at the moment, but naturally the basic public service absence that people highlight to motivate Naxalites need to be eliminated. So after all, the real win will be an improvement of public service deliveries, which I think will the delivery of which I think can be improved over time. So that also needs to be, the causes need to be really worked upon. Even now there are limitations to our public service deliveries even now, so that we need to acknowledge. Jay, sorry for the long rant, but back to you.
Nee, I totally agree with you. And I think it's high time that we stop viewing Naxalism only from the lens of left-wing extremism, because Bastar, which is one of the most affected areas of left-wing extremism, the king of the Bastar state was this man called Praveer Chandra Bhanj Deo, and he was considered to be a god for the local tribals. It is said that he also led a rebellion for the rights of the tribals and for the right of his people against the Indian state. And in 1966, his palace around Jagdalpur was surrounded, and he was eventually assassinated by the Indian state, which led to a lot of anathema being generated towards the Indians. And that's how, after the Naxalbadi movement in 1967, so many people started to, identify themselves with the quote unquote tribal rebellion in other parts of the country. So if you just look at it from the angle of left wing politics, it's, I would say, it is, simplifying it, because in essentiality what left wing politics does is it makes you believe that kings and queens should be looked down upon, and gods should not be, should not be given any type of reverence. But here you are, one of the most important aspects of left-wing extremism in India, Bastar, Jagdalpur, areas which had like such massive attacks. The fire to the powder keg was because of the killing of their king, who they considered as a god. So how is that left wing in any sense? So these are going to be my concluding thoughts, and we can, like, save the rest of our yapping for other episodes.
Yeah, I mean, Jay, that's a very, very important perspective that you're putting in. That naturally, maybe a left-wing ideology drove the left-wing extremist movement, but not all of the wants of the tribals of Chhattisgarh and not all their reasons to fight can fit into this left-wing extremist ideology block. Maybe there were other reasons that pushed them to extremism, and now it is the great credit of the Union Home Ministry and the government of India that finally countering left-wing extremism has become policy priority. I will also move on to my concluding remarks, but there was a time where left-wing extremism, even in the states which were affected, naturally Chhattisgarh and Andhra Pradesh have been badly affected, but even in other affected states like MP, where I am now, Bihar, it wasn't really much in people's heads to counter it and to eliminate it. But now it's become a national policy priority, and I think the MHA is leading the charge into sort of isolating these armed extremists and eliminating them, or rather giving them an opportunity to surrender. Both are welcome for the Indian state. So, now I feel like at the cost of pretending to be an expert and aggrandizing myself, I will give some notes on what should be the way forward. So, there has to be the continuing of the police capacity building that has been ongoing. We have already spoken about how local police has led the charge against Naxalites. That doesn't mean that there is no scope for improving them. They can still always be better trained. We can give them intelligence support. We can maybe make them experts at jungle warfare, and we can have some kind of uh, joint coordination mechanism. We already know that Chhattisgarh, Andhra Pradesh police do work in coordination with the CRPF and other CAPFs like ITBP, BSF, which have deployment in that area. But I feel like if you can have like almost like a joint command in this area where you can almost operate like one unit, even it may already be happening, but the idea should be to eliminate all coordination issues. Now, these are like the policing security solutions that I could think of. Naturally, I'm no expert. I'm just giving my thoughts. Now, the other thing that can be worked upon is reducing the trust deficit that tribals have in the Indian state. The idea should be that we are here to counter the Maoists who have guns, but everybody who differs with us ideologically, they must stop viewing the state as predatory, especially around the forest rights and mining. So one thing that drove people to left-wing extremism was anxiety about forest rights and mining. Now, when you tell people that there are constitutional values and coded laws that allow you to assert your rights and get become a part of the political process, the trust deficit on part of the tribals will reduce. There are gaps in the legal processes which lead to some issues that need to be done away with to develop this trust. And then finally uh, we need to reduce psychological support for the left-wing extremists. For that, the Chhattisgarh police, DRG, all they need to take charge. They need to build confidence in the tribals. They need to build confidence in the villagers. This is like my view of what should be the way forward, and I think we can wrap it up on that note. All right,
Yeah. Thank you so much.
all right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay,
Bye,
for joining
guys.
us.
See
Bye
you.
bye.
See you.
Bye bye.